My wife hid her debt while I worked 2 jobs, so I paid it off quietly, then left, and she begged for forgiveness I denied. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for most of my adult life, I believed being a good husband meant carrying more weight without complaining. I was raised on this quiet idea that love was proven through endurance, not comfort, and that if something felt heavy, you just picked it up and kept going. When I got married, that belief followed me into every decision I made. I worked 2 jobs, one full-time during the day, and another at night, coming home when the streets were empty and the house was dark. I'd unlock the door quietly, shoes in hand, my body aching in places I didn't even know could hurt. I kept telling myself it was temporary. Just a few years, I thought. Love lasts longer than exhaustion. My wife always seemed supportive on the surface. She'd hug me when I came home and say things like, "I don't know how you do it," or, "I'm so grateful for you." But gratitude never turned into action. She never offered to pick up extra work, never asked how she could help, never suggested we rebalance anything. Her support lived entirely in words. We had an arrangement that felt reasonable at the time. I handled the big things, rent, utilities, groceries, savings, because I made more and wanted us to be stable. She managed her own expenses, which she insisted were personal and under control. Whenever I asked casually, she'd smile and say, "I've got it handled, don't worry." And I didn't worry. That was the problem. I grew up believing endurance equaled loyalty. My dad used to say, "Real men don't complain, they provide." So when something felt off, I told myself I was being paranoid or selfish. Questioning felt like weakness. Trust felt like strength. At that stage, I trusted her completely. I trusted that we were a team, that honesty was automatic, that sacrifice would be met with respect. I never imagined money, of all things, would become the weapon used against me. Not yet. At first, the cracks were so small I convinced myself they were nothing. A stack of unopened mail would sit on the counter for days, pushed slightly out of sight, and when I asked about it, she'd laugh and say, "It's just junk." Sometimes her phone would buzz late at night, screen lighting up the room while I was half asleep, and she'd flip it face down without a word. I noticed, but I didn't press. Whenever finances came up, even casually, her tone shifted. Not angry, defensive. If I asked, "Hey, how are things on your end?" she'd sigh and say, "Why are you stressing about this? I told you I'm fine." Once, when I offered to sit down and go over a budget together, she snapped, "Do you not trust me?" The question landed like a slap. I remember apologizing immediately, even though I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. I was exhausted all the time, which made it easier to accept her reassurances. After 16-hour days, my brain didn't have the energy to dig deeper. I'd collapse onto the couch, the hum of the refrigerator loud in the silence, and tell myself I was overthinking. She said she's got it. That should be enough. But there were moments that lingered. Like when I overheard her on the phone in the bedroom, whispering urgently, her voice tight in a way I'd never heard before. When I asked who it was, she smiled too quickly and said, "Just a friend." Or when I noticed small charges on shared statements, things I knew I didn't buy, but told myself they must be hers, and therefore none of my business. The worst part wasn't the signs themselves. It was how I reacted to them. Every time my instincts told me something was wrong, I pushed that feeling down. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I didn't want to create problems where there weren't any. So I chose peace over clarity. I chose silence over discomfort. And slowly, without realizing it, I taught her that I wouldn't look too closely, even when I should have. The more exhausted I became, the more her lifestyle started to stand out in ways I couldn't ignore. It wasn't one big thing, it was dozens of small ones that piled up quietly. New clothes appeared in her closet, tags already removed. Her nails were always done, her hair always freshly styled. Packages showed up at the door while I was at work, boxes stacked neatly like they belonged there. One night, after a double shift, I walked into the kitchen and saw takeout containers from a restaurant we used to call a special occasion place. The smell of garlic and butter hung in the air. She smiled brightly and said, "I needed a little treat today." I remember forcing a smile back, even though my stomach was empty and my paycheck already mentally spent. When I asked how she could afford these things, she bristled. "Why does everything have to be about money with you?" she said, crossing her arms. "I'm allowed to enjoy my life too." She framed it as self-care, as empowerment, as something I wouldn't understand because I was always in work mode. Somehow, my concern became jealousy. My questions became control. Friends noticed before I fully did. One of them joked, "Man, she's living better than both of us combined." I laughed it off, defending her instantly. "She's got her stuff handled," I said, confident and wrong. Admitting doubt felt like betraying my own marriage. Meanwhile, my world shrank. I stopped buying things for myself altogether. I wore the same work boots until the soles were thin, ignored the pain in my back, and told myself this imbalance was temporary. Once we're stable, I thought. Once I can drop the second job. But stability never came. Instead, the gap between us grew wider. I was surviving. She was indulging. And the more normal it became, the more invisible I felt. I started wondering, quietly, guiltily, if I was working this hard for us, or just for the idea of us I was afraid to question. I didn't confront her. I didn't push. I just swallowed the discomfort and kept moving forward, hoping it would resolve itself. It didn't. The night everything changed didn't feel dramatic at first. It was quiet, almost boring. I came home later than usual, rain still clinging to my jacket, the house dim except for the kitchen light she'd forgotten to turn off. On the counter sat a single envelope, thicker than the rest of the mail, my wife's name printed in bold letters I didn't recognize. I wouldn't have opened it if it hadn't already been torn. Just slightly. Like someone had meant to come back to it and forgot. I stood there for a long moment, my heart thudding for reasons I couldn't explain, telling myself to mind my own business. Then I saw the return address. Collections. My stomach dropped. I slid the paper out slowly, like I was defusing something fragile. Numbers filled the page, balances, overdue notices, interest rates. At first, they didn't make sense. I reread them, blinking hard, my brain refusing to connect the dots. This wasn't one card. It wasn't one mistake. It was several accounts, all maxed out, all late. I sat down at the kitchen table, the chair scraping loudly against the floor in the empty house. My hands started shaking. I kept thinking there had to be an explanation, identity theft, a misunderstanding, anything that didn't involve the person I trusted most lying to my face. But the dates told a different story. This debt had been building for years. Quietly. While I worked nights. While I skipped meals. While I told myself we were being responsible. When she came home and saw the paper in front of me, her face went white. Not confused. Not surprised. Just caught. "Why are you going through my stuff?" she asked sharply, like I was the one who'd crossed a line. That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident I'd stumbled into. This was something she'd hidden on purpose. And sitting there, under that harsh kitchen light, I realized I didn't just feel tired anymore. I felt betrayed. But I still didn't know how deep it went, or what it was going to cost me. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just sat there, the paper between us, and asked quietly, "How long were you going to keep this from me?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, flat and distant, like it belonged to someone else. For a second, she said nothing, just stared at the floor like she was calculating her next move. Then she exploded. "Why were you opening my mail?" she snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. That's a huge invasion of privacy. I remember blinking at her, genuinely confused. I was holding proof of years of lies, and somehow the conversation had turned into my wrongdoing. My chest tightened, the familiar instinct to apologize rising automatically. I tried again. This is serious. This is a lot of money. My finger tapped the page, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. Why didn't you tell me? She crossed her arms and scoffed. I was handling it. I didn't want to stress you out while you were already working so much. Then came the line that still echoes in my head. I figured eventually, once things were better, you'd help. We're married. That's what partners do. That was the first real crack. She wasn't panicked because of the debt. She was irritated that I'd found it early. She framed it like a misunderstanding, like a future plan we just hadn't talked about yet. When I went quiet, she softened instantly, tears, trembling voice, hands reaching for mine. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, she said. Not sorry she hid it. Sorry I saw it. I felt like the floor had shifted under me. Every thank you, every hug after my shifts, every I appreciate you, suddenly felt rehearsed. Strategic. Like she'd always assumed I'd clean this up the way I cleaned up everything else. I didn't argue anymore. I told her I needed time to think. She nodded, relief flashing across her face too quickly. She thought this was a fight we'd move past. But as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought kept looping in my head. If this was what she felt entitled to, what else didn't I know? After that night, something in me went quiet. Not calm, hollow. I stopped asking questions, stopped reacting, stopped trying to make her understand how deeply she'd hurt me. On the surface, I played my role like always. I went to work. I came home late. I nodded when she talked. Inside, I was already pulling away. She seemed relieved by my silence. I'm glad you're not mad anymore, she said one evening, curling up next to me on the couch. The TV droned on in the background, some laugh track echoing through the room, completely out of place. I didn't correct her. I just stared at the screen and let her believe whatever she needed to believe. At night, after she fell asleep, I became someone else. I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting off empty coffee cups. I pulled credit reports, logged into accounts I didn't know existed, traced timelines she'd never mentioned. Each click revealed more damage. Cards maxed out. Loans taken while I was working doubles. Late fees stacked on interest like a punishment for trusting too easily. The number at the bottom of it all made my stomach turn. It was worse than the letter suggested. Much worse. I felt something shift as I stared at that total. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And patterns don't fix themselves with apologies. She'd ask occasionally, "Are we okay?" her voice soft, eyes searching my face. I'd answer, "I'm just tired." It wasn't a lie. I was exhausted in ways sleep couldn't fix. Somewhere in those quiet nights, I stopped seeing her as my partner. Partners don't hide sinking ships and expect you to drown with them. I started seeing her as a risk I couldn't afford anymore. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to explode. I was going to disappear. The decision didn't come in a dramatic burst of clarity. It came quietly, sometime around 3 a.m., when the house was silent and the numbers on my screen refused to change no matter how long I stared at them. I realized then that arguing wouldn't give me peace, and forgiveness wouldn't give me control. If I wanted out cleanly, I had to finish this on my terms. So I decided to pay it all off. Not because she deserved it. Not because I wanted to save the marriage. But because I needed to leave without chains wrapped around my future. I'd seen what shared debt did to people. I wasn't going to spend the next decade tied to her lies through court dates and collections calls. I didn't tell her. I didn't hint. I didn't ask for gratitude. I just started working even more. Extra shifts. Weekends. I sold things I cared about, my old guitar, a watch my dad gave me, furniture I'd built with my own hands. Every sacrifice felt different this time. Colder. Surgical. At night, while she slept peacefully beside me, I made payments. Watching balances drop felt surreal, like erasing evidence of a crime I didn't commit. Each confirmation email brought relief mixed with something bitter I couldn't name. I wasn't saving us. I was buying my freedom. She noticed the change before long. "You've been distant," she said one morning, reaching for my arm. "Are you mad at me again?" I shook my head and said, "Just tired." She smiled, reassured, completely unaware she was living on borrowed time. When the final payment went through, I sat alone in my car in a parking lot after work. The engine was off. The world felt muted. I expected pride, maybe even closure. Instead, I felt empty. Because clearing her debt didn't make me feel lighter. It made one thing terrifyingly clear. I was done, and she had no idea what was coming next. After the debt was gone, everything around me felt fake. The house, the routine, even the way she said my name, it all felt like a set I was walking through, playing a role I no longer believed in. I'd already left her emotionally, but my body was still there, sitting across from her at the dinner table, listening to stories that didn't matter anymore. Strangely, she became more affectionate. Lighter. The tension she'd carried for years seemed to vanish overnight. She laughed more, touched my arm when she spoke, planned little outings like we were finally back on track. One night she said, "I feel like things are finally getting easier for us." I stared at my plate, the clink of my fork against ceramic too loud, and wondered how someone could feel relief built on lies. That was the loneliest part. Carrying a secret this heavy while the person who caused it slept peacefully beside me. At night, I lay awake listening to her breathe, the ceiling fan clicking rhythmically above us, my chest tight with resentment and grief. I'd given everything I had, and she still asked for more, just in subtler ways now. I started planning in small, careful steps. I opened a new bank account during my lunch break, my hands sweating as I signed the forms. I scrolled through apartment listings late at night, imagining silence that wasn't tense, space that felt like mine. I researched legal advice in incognito tabs, clearing my history every time. She sensed the distance but misread it completely. "We should plan a vacation," she said one evening, eyes bright. "You've worked so hard. We deserve something good." The word "we" made my stomach twist. I nodded noncommittally, the weight of the lie pressing on my chest. I felt like I was betraying her, even though I knew I was protecting myself. The closer she tried to pull me back, the more trapped I felt. Every day after that felt like borrowed time. And I could feel the moment coming, the one where pretending would finally become impossible. Rock bottom didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came on a random Tuesday night, in our dimly lit kitchen, while I was reheating leftovers after another long shift. She leaned against the counter, scrolling on her phone, completely relaxed. Then she looked up and said, casually, like she was asking for milk, "Hey. I was thinking. Could you help me with one last loan?" I froze. The microwave hummed loudly, the smell of cold rice and sauce filling the air. "What?" I asked, even though I'd heard her perfectly. "It's not a big deal," she said quickly. "Just something to consolidate things. It'll make everything easier. I just need your credit this time." She smiled, reassuring, like this was a favor between teammates. Something inside me collapsed. I had already destroyed my savings. I had already worked myself sick. I had already erased years of her debt in silence. And here she was, asking for more, because in her mind, that's what I was for. Not a husband. Not a partner. A resource. I felt dizzy. My hands started shaking, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to steady myself. All I could think was, she doesn't even know what I've done. And it still isn't enough. I muttered something about being tired and went to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, my work boots still on, staring at the floor. My chest hurt in a way that wasn't physical. Years of sacrifice replayed in my head, missed sleep, missed joy, missed versions of myself I'd never get back. That night, I didn't cry. I just felt empty. For the first time, I allowed myself to say the truth out loud, even if only in a whisper. She doesn't love me. She needs me. And sitting there alone, I realized I wasn't scared of leaving anymore. I was scared of staying, and disappearing completely. Once I admitted I was done, everything moved faster than I expected. The fear was gone, replaced by a strange, steady calm. I stopped fantasizing about leaving and started preparing. During lunch breaks, I made calls from my car with the windows cracked, my voice low. I opened a separate bank account, rerouted my paycheck, and felt something loosen in my chest when the confirmation emails came through. At home, I acted normal. That was the hardest part. I nodded while she talked about weekend plans. I listened while she complained about coworkers. I even laughed at jokes I didn't find funny anymore. The house smelled like coffee and detergent, familiar and suffocating at the same time. I was already gone, but my body hadn't caught up yet. I found an apartment across town, small, quiet, nothing fancy. When I toured it, the silence felt unreal. No tension. No walking on eggshells. Just empty rooms and possibility. I signed the lease that same day, my hand steady as if this decision had been waiting years to be made. I didn't announce anything. I waited. The moment came on a Sunday evening. She was sitting on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling on her phone. I stood across from her and said, "We need to talk." My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. She looked up, smiling at first. "What's wrong?" "I'm leaving," I said simply. Her smile vanished. "What? Why would you say that?" She laughed nervously, like it was a bad joke. I told her I'd already taken care of the debt. All of it. Her eyes widened, relief flashing first, then confusion. "So, we're okay?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "The debt is gone." "I'm not." The room felt too quiet. She stood up, reaching for me, panic starting to creep into her voice. "We can fix this. You didn't even give me a chance." I picked up my bag, my keys cold in my hand. "You had years." As I walked toward the door, I heard her call my name, louder this time. And for the first time, I didn't turn around. I didn't make it to the end of the block before my phone started vibrating. By the time I pulled over, there were already missed calls stacked on my screen, her name filling it like a warning. I didn't answer. I sat there with my hands on the steering wheel, heart pounding, staring straight ahead until the shaking in my fingers eased. The messages came next. At first, they were confused. "Where are you? Can we talk?" Then they turned emotional. "I don't understand what just happened. Please come back." I kept driving. By the time I got to the apartment, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The quiet space felt surreal, bare walls, the faint smell of fresh paint, no history clinging to the air. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down, my back against the wall, reading her words scroll by. That's when the begging started. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "I know I messed up. I'll do therapy. I'll be honest. I'll give you full access to everything." Her apologies came fast and frantic, like she was throwing promises at a door that was already closing. She called again. This time I answered. Her voice broke immediately. She was crying hard, struggling to breathe. "Please," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just didn't know how to tell you. I need you. Need. Not love. Not respect. Need. I closed my eyes, listening, feeling nothing but exhaustion. She talked about change, about second chances, about how marriage was supposed to survive mistakes like this. She said my name over and over, like repetition could rewind time. When she finally paused, waiting for me to say something, the silence stretched between us. I thought about the years I spent carrying her secrets. The nights I worked myself numb. The moment she asked for one last loan. I paid your debt, I said quietly. That was the last thing I could give you. She sobbed, begging me not to do this, promising anything I wanted. I said nothing else. I ended the call. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself. The days after I left were quieter than I expected. No dramatic collapse. No sudden relief. Just space. Real space. The kind that lets your thoughts echo a little too loudly at first. I unpacked slowly, placing my things in drawers that were finally mine, sitting on the floor of my new apartment eating takeout because I didn't have the energy to cook. The silence wasn't comforting yet, but it wasn't oppressive either. She kept reaching out. Emails. Messages from unknown numbers. Long paragraphs about how she'd finally realized everything, how losing me had been her wake-up call. I read some of them. Deleted others without opening them. Each one sounded more desperate than the last, like someone trying to rebuild a house after it had already burned down. What surprised me most was the guilt. It crept in at night, whispering that I was cruel for leaving after fixing everything. That I owed her forgiveness because I had the power to give it. I sat with that feeling instead of running from it, and slowly I understood something I'd never been taught. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. Especially when it costs you yourself. I started sleeping again. Real sleep. I stopped jumping at every notification. I went days without feeling that constant knot in my chest. For the first time in years, my money stayed where I put it. My energy belonged to me. I didn't have to earn rest anymore. I thought about the version of me who believed sacrifice was love, who thought silence was strength. I wished I could tell him that loyalty without honesty is just self-erasure. That being needed isn't the same as being valued. I never replied to her final message. The one where she said she'd wait forever if that's what it took. I didn't owe her closure. I gave myself that instead. Walking away wasn't revenge. It wasn't punishment. It was acceptance, of the truth, of my limits, of what I deserved. And for the first time, choosing myself didn't feel selfish. It felt necessary.